This chapter brings the discussion of teleology very much up to date with a look at the contemporary intelligent design movement, which is a much misunderstood, misportrayed movement in popular discussions. And we look at what really does intelligent design movement claim, what are their arguments, what is the philosophy around issues like, is it a scientific argument or not? I would say that intelligent design theory boils down to three main claims, and if you agree with these three claims, then you agree with intelligent design theory. The three claims are this. Number one, that there are reliable criteria or tests that we can apply to empirical data that reliably indicate that they are the product of design if they are. We can't apply these tests to say that things are not designed. They're only positive tests, but that we have some positive criteria that we can use to reliably infer that something is the product of design when it is. The second claim is that there are that nature exhibits empirical patterns or events that pass through our reliable criteria for design. Now, if both of those claims are true, you can take those two claims as two premises in a syllogism, and the conclusion that follows from them is that therefore at least particular aspects of nature are the product of intelligent design. The third ID claim is that this process of having these tests and applying them to nature and getting out the conclusion that those aspects of nature are designed, that this is a scientific project to be engaged in rather than a theological project or a philosophical project. Intelligent design theory is not the same as creationism, although creationism is a bit of a slippery word in its own right. You could say a creationist is simply anyone who believes that the world is created. And in that sense, of course, all theists, anyone who believes in a God, is a creationist in that sense. But of course, in contemporary culture, the term creationist is very closely associated with a so-called young earth creationist position. And some young earth creationists advance what they call a creation science position, where they try and argue that scientific investigation of the world comports with a particular interpretation of the creation passages in Scripture. So I think creationism actually starts with a particular interpretation of Scripture and then tries to argue that science validates or supports that picture of reality taken from that particular interpretation of Scripture. Intelligent design theory does not start with an interpretation of Scripture, neither indeed does it end with any discussion about the relationship between any particular revelatory claims and science. It is purely focused on the question, are there reliable scientific indicators of actual design rather than merely apparent design within nature, and it limits itself to that issue. By limiting itself to the question of are there scientifically detectable indicators of actual rather than merely apparent design within nature, not only is intelligent design theory different from creationism, it is also different from natural theology. It's not actually involved in the philosophical debate about is there a God, because there's an obvious gap between the conclusion there's empirical indications of actual intelligent design within nature and the conclusion that that designer is God as conceived within a particular religious or philosophical tradition. There's all sorts of different potential candidates for the role of intelligent designer or intelligent designers, indeed. So to bridge that gap, you could take the conclusion of intelligent design and plug it into a philosophical discussion about who or what is the most plausible candidate or candidates for the role of designer, then I think you're into the philosophical and theological discussion. Specified complexity is a particular kind of complexity identified by ID theorists in a sort of statistical test for design. And it's not simply that something is complex, i.e. unlikely as a contingent event, but that it is both complex and hits an independently knowable pattern. This concept of specified complexity is perhaps best grasped just through some concrete kind of examples. When you put your card into a hole-in-the-wall machine to get money out of your bank account, this is a good example of specified complexity, because you have to enter one number into the keypad, and any 4-digit number, say, that you enter into a keypad is complex, is unlikely. It's one possible 4-digit number out of a huge set of possible 4-digit numbers that could be entered. Okay, but of course it's not simply that you are causing an unlikely, a complex event to happen. That complex event, it has to be specified as the one number out of all of the possible numbers that will actually allow you access to your bank account, will let you get the money out. Not any old number will get you your money. There's a particular number that's specified as the one that allows you access to your bank account. The principle of credulity basically says that it's reasonable to take things to be the way they seem to be to you, until and unless you have a good enough reason for doubting that things are the way they seem to be to you. And if you didn't follow that, you'd be in a pit of skepticism about a huge number of things that it's obviously reasonable to believe on a day-by-day basis. So it's a very useful sort of philosophical rule of thumb about when to trust your experience and the appearance of reality and so on. If you take the principle of credulity and you apply it to the natural world, it is blindingly obvious that the world looks like it's the product of design. So, even atheist and agnostic scientists and philosophers recognise this. Richard Dawkins defines biology as the study of complicated things that look like they are the product of design. Now, for him, that appearance is misleading. He has to say that although things appear to be designed, actually there's not, and here's why. That means the burden of proof is put on the person who says reality is not designed to say, I know it looks like it is, but here's why I'm justified in thinking that appearance is misleading. And I think it's interesting to note that in Darwin's Origin of Species, Darwin says, let's shift that burden of proof. Let's assume that the process of evolution by natural selection can produce this appearance of design until and unless we've got good reason to think that it can't. And I think that's an illegitimate shifting of the burden of proof. The intelligent design movement point to a variety of different aspects of nature as aspects that give empirical evidence of design. And some of these aspects fall within the realm covered by evolutionary biology, but some of them don't as well. And in that sense, you can do a sort of end run around the biological discussion by focusing on some of the preconditions of biological evolution. If you can say these preconditions of biological evolution give evidence of design, well then any further discussion about the aspects that would fall under the competency of biology is just a sort of further interesting discussion. But you've still got the main point at issue is there empirical evidence of design anywhere in nature? So it's interesting to look particularly at these preconditions of evolution. The primary precondition of anything within the evolutionary realm is the existence of a cosmos within which things could evolve. And actually, scientists have been stunned to find that those preconditions of a cosmos that could have life within it are what's called very finely tuned, very finely balanced, so that life is possible, so that even indeed preconditions of life, such as there being stable matter in existence, is possible. And this fine-tuning of the universe is an extremely lively contemporary area of debate within the philosophy of design. The idea would be that the fine-tuning of the universe is an example of specified complexity, that not only is it one particular set of physical laws and constants out of all of the possible physical laws and constants that there could have been, but that the particular set that exists happens to hit the independent specification of being the set that allows for the existence of complex things, including life. Well, one popular objection to this argument is to appeal to the notion of multiple universes, to give yourself, as it were, extra throws of the dice in order that the universe not actually be an example of specified complexity, because it not be very complex, not very unlikely that some universe or other would hit this specification of being fruitful for life, because you've got lots and lots of opportunities to hit that specification, and therefore it's not very unlikely that you hit it. There are a number of problems with this multiple universe appeal as an objection to the inference to design from the apparent specified complexity of the universe. One of them is this, that it's all very well to say, well, maybe there are lots of different universes, and if there were, that would mean that ours isn't complex, and so doesn't hit the criterion. But that's not enough for an actual objection. For an actual objection, you would need to say that there actually are lots of other universes, such that our universe isn't actually complex. And we don't actually have any independent evidence that there are multiple universes. It's a bit like saying, yes, okay, if there were a billion monkeys and a billion typewriters typing away for a billion years, then possibly they could produce the works of William Shakespeare by chance. But nobody looking at a book of the complete works of Shakespeare says to themselves, aha, that must mean that there's a billion monkeys with a billion typewriters somewhere who've been typing away for millions and millions of years. The one author explanation for the works of Shakespeare is much preferable to the many monkeys explanation, in the absence of independent evidence for the existence of the many monkeys with the many typewriters, etc. Similar criticism, parallel reply could be made in terms of the universe. The question of whether or not ID is science, I think, is an interesting question, because it raises questions within the whole philosophy of science of, well, what is science? How should it be defined? And so on. But it's not a crucial question, because, of course, ideas can be true, arguments can be sound, without being scientific ideas or scientific arguments. And actually, I think if you think that the ID argument, that we've got these criteria that are reliable, that there are things in nature that pass through the criteria, and that therefore at least aspects of nature really are designed, I think if you believed that, it would be then pretty implausible to say, but that whole argument and conclusion isn't science, And therefore, in order to really understand how nature is, we should start transferring huge sums of money from the university science departments over to the, what would it be, the philosophy department or the theology department or something. No, rather than saying, okay, well, that is science then, because science is all about trying to discover the truth about the material universe.